Hi, my name is Sunny Panu and you're here on our Minorum YouTube channel, and again I have another special guest with us. We've had several interviews with himself, Mr. Jayant Bhandari. Jayant, thanks a lot for being on the channel again.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Excellent. So Jayant has done a lot of coverage on India. We've done several segments, and I want to revisit this because a lot of things have been happening in the last few weeks, especially with the Chinese equity markets are correcting over $3 trillion over just the last few weeks. And now with India itself, everybody's looking to India as the gem of the world, especially Christine Lagarde of the IMF. Seems that is where the epicenter of growth is going to come from globally. So let's start with Indian gold demand. I guess it doesn't seem to have been much disturbed, with 900 tons of gold, which amounts to $34 billion coming in the last financial year. 22,000 tons of gold are in households and Indian financial institutions. And with the Modi government doing a lot in terms of monetizing gold, such as via gold schemes, sovereign gold funds, gold ETFs, even trying to repatriate some gold from temples. But now with the gold price around $1,100, the US dollar strengthening, possible rate hike, will Indians continue to buy gold?
Well, I think Indians are buying more and more gold based on what I hear from the traders.
Mm-hmm.
And the reason is that the thought that Modi government would be able to change the course of India,
Mm-hmm.
it hasn't turned out to be the truth at the ground level.
Mm-hmm.
And as a result, Indians will increasingly want to buy more gold.
Right.
The thing that restricts India from buying more gold is the fact that their economy is stagnating.
Mm-hmm.
Now, as far as what you said about Christina Lagarde saying that India is the gem of the world going forward, that's completely wrong. China continues to be the gem of the world.
Right.
India was a possibility, it is a possibility, and it will continue to be a potential, but it will continue to stay unrealized because Indians are not doing the right things to move that country forward.
Mm-hmm. So more critics now than ever on China. And so how do you respond that way?
Well, I mean, China is still growing by about 7% or something.
Okay.
7% of Chinese GDP, which is 4 times the GDP per capita of India,
Right.
has an enormous, in absolute amount, that's an enormous growth compared to India's 6 or 7%. India is growing at 1/4 the base of China, and that is only for this year. What happens next year? No one has any number on. But remember, India's growth rate can be much better this year, not because of inherent goodness about the Indian economy, but because of one simple thing, and that is that their biggest import, which is oil, has fallen by 50%
Interesting.
in price, and that has a huge influence on the economy of India. This will not continue going forward, in my view. IMF and all the economists can create all kinds of growth projections on their spreadsheets.
Right.
But what is it that backs those numbers? Christina Lagarde goes to New Delhi, stays in 5-star hotels, gets driven around in air-conditioned Mercedes. She has no real-life experience of India. She has no real-life experience of what actually happens in India 20 kilometers outside the center of New Delhi.
Interesting. And just to take it a step further, just supporting, I guess, your point and your doubt on the economic growth. With Prime Minister Narendra Modi, it seems like it's a positive economy because they've got this new calculation called gross value added growth calculation, and they have a growth target of 7.5% for 2015. And however, when you compare it to statements that are made by Bajaj Auto Chairman Mr. Rahul Bajaj, which is one of the largest automakers of two-wheeler transport vehicles such as scooters or motorcycles, which is one of the main modes of transport there. I'll just read a couple of quotes for him. It's challenging to reconcile 7.5% growth in gross value added, which is GVA, a new concept introduced by Central Statistical Organization to measure economic activity. He further goes on to say the new national income estimates released by the government CSO have confused and perplexed many. These numbers suggest that GVA grew 7.5% in 2014 versus 6.6% in 2013 to 14. It seems that much of this extra growth was on account of a larger basket of services. He then had to say, I am neither an economist nor a statistician. However, as an industrialist who has run a business for several decades and observed others who manage different enterprises across many sectors, I find it challenging to reconcile 7.5% growth. Do you think other people think the same way as you do, as he does?
If you are a person operating at the ground level, as Rahul Bajaj is, he's a very smart and astute businessman. He knows the realities on the ground. Now, there are financial people, economists, politicians, and bureaucrats. These guys don't really have real life experiences, and they can create numbers on their spreadsheet. The reality is, when you talk with the people at the ground level, the problem with people like Rahul Bajaj is that he can't find trained people to work in his factories. And that is the problem of India. India cannot grow at the rates projected by these paper pushers, and the reason is that India is not producing trained people. And by trained people, I don't mean people who have degrees. I'm talking about people who can write the name of their degrees. And so often I have seen that people who have done their MBAs and have MBA degrees cannot write the spelling of financial properly. Now, if that's the kind of people coming out of Indian universities, they are not trained.
Okay. So before we move on to the issue of smuggling, which is still rampant, April to June export numbers were down 16.75%, which is around $66 billion US. Imports were also down around the same period of 12.6% of around $45 billion US as well. Now, with this decrease in growth, when compared to the GVA, and you mentioned that Indians will still continue to buy gold, how do they buy gold if the economy is slowing down? Where do they get this cash? How do they get this gold? Why would they get more gold?
I mean, India's second biggest import is gold, and that is where a big chunk of savings of Indians go. So when the leftover money that Indians have goes into primarily two things. One is property and the other is gold.
Okay.
And the reason why they invest in property and gold is, and I wrote a big article on this thing, Sunny, the reason Indians invest so much of their money in property and gold is because they cannot find investment opportunities in that country. And that is why India has capital control on moving money abroad.
Interesting.
So the situation today is that property market is stagnating. It's extremely, extremely expensive. If you look at the pricing of properties in India, Shanghai and Vancouver starts to look cheap in comparison.
Okay.
So that is why Indians buy gold. They will continue to buy gold. It is indeed true. Access to cash they have is limited because of a stagnant economy. So if the gold price goes up, they will buy that much less gold in reality. But that is not because of lack of interest in gold. It's because of lack of financial capability to buy gold.
Interesting. Well, smuggling is still rampant. I'll just shoot up some numbers here, which are quite staggering actually in terms of the amount of cases that were discovered by the border services there in India. In 2012 to 2013, they saw 870 cases that were filed, 400 kilograms of gold. 2013 to 2014, 2,700 cases for 2,760 kilograms of gold, so just around 2.5 tons, I guess. And then 2014 to 2015 increased to 4,400 cases, which amounted for 4.5 tons of gold that were smuggled and confiscated by the border services. Despite the new import rules that they have relaxed for importing gold, there's still a reason to smuggle gold. Why is this continuing? And is this also a true reflection of Indian gold demand?
Well, the confiscation of gold can be an arrangement between smugglers, the army, and the bureaucrats. So these numbers don't really make much sense to me. The bureaucrats and the army would want to show that they are achieving something by confiscating an increasing amount of gold every year. The reality is that everything is organized around how to maximize collection of bribes by people in the government, which includes politicians, bureaucrats, and people who operate in the border, which is Border Security Force and the Indian Army. Now, all you need to do is to pay a few dollars in bribes to these people to move your gold into the country. Now, big smugglers would of course work with bureaucrats to get some of the gold confiscated so that it shows it is a good media thing for everyone that Indian government is succeeding. But at the end of the day, this import restriction is completely stupid. Government of India should understand why Indians want to buy so much gold. They have to address the underlying problem, why Indians buy gold and not invest in factories. And I think that money should go into factories. But the reality is it will not go to factories unless Indians and Indian government is start to address why people buy so much gold.
Okay. So what is your outlook going forward in terms of the precious metals?
My conversations with you in the past, I decline to be too optimistic about gold. But I think increasingly the ecology is such that the future looks increasingly very optimistic to me about gold and gold prices. And the reason is that you have to understand why Indians buy so much gold. They buy so much gold because they cannot find investment opportunities in India. That is now increasingly happening in the West. Today, in many European countries, you buy bonds at negative yield, which means that what you give into the system is more than what you get out of it. In a negative yield environment, gold does very well as it does in India. But it will take a while for that process to kick in, because right now the most liquid instrument is the US dollar. So people are going into US dollar. Once US dollar has become too expensive, this money will overflow into things like gold. And that's when it will become very exciting for me and for people who are interested in gold. Again, I have recently become so optimistic about gold.
Right. Okay, excellent. Well, thank you so much for viewing our interview here. Thanks again, Jayant, for a great overview of India, and look forward to the next update. If you want to find out more information, please visit jayantbhandari.com to reach out to Jayant as well.
Thank you for having me, Sunny.
Thanks, Jayant.